order, and I call the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Communications.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. What a measure of chutzpah, what a measure of sheer brazen effrontery it takes for the Labor Party to stand up and criticise the coalition on the NBN. This is like somebody who's crashed his car, who runs away and then comes back to the scene later to berate the tow truck driver about how he's doing the fix-up job. You know, so passionate is Labor about this topic, so effective has the member for Blaxland been as a spokesman on this topic, that he's asked 3 questions only of the Minister for Communications in 2 years of government. Only one of them was about the NBN, and fascinatingly, it was about a 1923 wooden boat co-owned by the minister and an NBN executive. This is really extraordinary. The member for Blaxland seems to be keen on prompting discussion about conspicuous areas of Labor failure and coalition success, boats and NBN. We're doing what you failed to do. We're stopping the boats and we are delivering the NBN. Mr Deputy Speaker, we inherited a hopeless mess. Labor took a plan to the 2007 election. They were promising a 12 megabit per second fibre to the node, a private sector government joint venture, $4.7 billion of government money only. But of course, they hopelessly failed to execute on that plan. Their plans collapsed, and by April 2009 they were forced to go for the double or nothing strategy, shock and awe, and so, as is now well known, on a VIP flight between Melbourne and Brisbane, the only time that the then Broadband Minister, Senator Conroy, now supposedly the Shadow Minister for Defence, but his main priority seems to be Shadow Minister for defending his broadband legacy. His only chance to catch the then Prime Minister was on this VIP flight, and on the back of a beer coaster, with no detailed analysis, they came up with a plan for a 100 megabit per second network. Mr Deputy Speaker, this was a chaotic failure of public administration. That eminent public servant Bill Scales, commissioned to conduct an independent audit of the NBN public policy process, had this to say: the public policy process for developing NBN Mark II was rushed, chaotic and inadequate, with only perfunctory consideration by the Cabinet. After just 11 weeks of consideration, the government had decided to establish a completely new start-up company. There was no business case or any cost-benefit analysis or independent studies of the policy undertaken. It was one of the worst pieces of public policy execution we have ever seen in Australia. But supposedly, according to then Prime Minister Rudd, not to worry, there was still going to be private sector investment, and the mums and dads should consider investing in the bonds that were going to be issued to fund it. What a grossly irresponsible thing to say, and surprise, surprise, when the implementation report came out a year later, it turned out that the private sector experts, McKinsey and KPMG, said, "Oh, forget about that bit where there's still going to be private sector investment, because this plan is so hopeless that the private sector would not touch it with a barge pole." Of course, they had nobody with any experience of telecommunications on the board. The chairman of the board was an investment banker. The chief executive was not somebody from a telecommunications operator background. He was instead somebody from a telecommunications vendor background, a critical difference, one absolutely lost on the then minister who has no private sector experience. And what did they actually deliver in government? They delivered a lot of glossy brochures, they delivered a lot of press releases, there were a lot of media events, there were a lot of promises, but not much actual network. They consistently missed milestones, and by the time we came to government in September 2013, after 6 years, they'd achieved a mere 348,000 premises of the 12.2 million premises that were supposed to be passed. So chaotic, incompetent approach on the part of the previous government, and they have the extraordinary chutzpah to criticise the diligent and successful delivery which has characterised the approach of the Minister for Communications and now Prime Minister, who's done an extraordinary job of turning it around. Let's look at where we're up to. A mere 2 years after coming to government, now 1.32 million premises are able to connect. That is more than triple what Labor achieved in 6 years. There has been a step change in rollout speed. Some 13,000 premises per week are now being regularly passed as this rollout scales up to an industrial-scale operation. Systematic, businesslike, and with the corporate plan just released, there's a credible and well-developed path forward to 75% of premises being able to connect to this network by mid-2018. And in achieving that extraordinary turnaround, which in years to come I am certain will be a business school case study, we've seen very detailed analysis conducted with the strategic review to understand actually what the issues are. We've appointed, and the Minister for Communications appointed, competent, experienced people to the board. What a good idea. Let's have some people on the board who actually have some experience in the telecommunications industry. Not, you would have thought, particularly revolutionary, nothing that Labor bothered to do, but we put onto the board Ziggy Switkowski, former Chief Executive of both Telstra and Optus, Justin Milne, very experienced Internet executive, Aussie Mail and Telstra, Simon Hackett, the former Chief Executive of Internode, and of course, what isn't the member for Blaxland surprised that we would have on the board somebody who would give a full and nuanced view? We want expertise, we want people to give their views, and then we form a view. Under Labor, of course, he would already have been sent off to a re-education camp. He would be incurring thought re-education if Labor were in power. They just cannot understand our approach, which is to get the expertise we need to get the job done. The minister carried out a spectacular success in renegotiating the deals with Telstra and Optus. Can I tell you, Mr Deputy Speaker, I spent 8 years of my professional life before coming into this parliament as a senior executive at Optus on a near daily basis, dealing with Telstra, negotiating with Telstra. It's a tough job. Telstra are very, very capable executive team. Under the previous government, under then Minister Conroy, he got absolutely taken to the cleaners by Telstra. He had no idea what he was doing, and it took the present Minister for Communications and the present Prime Minister to turn it around. A spectacular achievement. And of course, the approach of openness and transparency that we have now seen. The rollout numbers are published every week. There's nothing to hide. It's all out there. There's a culture of transparency that NBN has been directed to achieve. This is an ambitious project with a lot to do, and we've always been very clear about it, and there's been an enormous amount achieved. Revenue has risen from $17 million in 2013, the last full year in which Labor had control of NBN. The year just completed, $164 million. So revenue is ramping up, connections are ramping up, the rollout is ramping up. We've got 283 premises, 1,000 premises now passed by fixed wireless, up from 39,000 when we came to power. The first satellite is due to launch on the 1st of October, with services to commence in the first half by halfway through next year. So sustained progress, sustained delivery. And let me make the point, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the NBN is really a very telling insight into two different approaches on two different sides of the parliament. Labor thinks it's all about the announcement. You whip out the press release, and that's all you need to do. Government is about delivery. Labor announced the fibre to the premises plan in 2009. They had no idea how to deliver it. A few weeks ago, they announced, now their RET target, their renewable energy target, is 50%. No idea how to deliver it. They promised free trade agreements for years without delivering them. They promised that they could stop the boats. They said, the Malaysian solution is going to fix it. The regional processing centre is going to fix it. And they never delivered it. On this side of the parliament, we're about a sensible plan and on execution and delivery. Free trade agreements with Korea, with Japan, with China, delivered. Stopping the boats, delivered. An NBN rollout with a relentless focus on delivery, and in 2 years we have tripled what Labor managed to achieve in 6 years of government. The Australian people expect their government to deliver. What they have seen when it comes to the NBN is the Minister for Communications and now the Prime Minister leading a relentless focus on execution, a credible strategy based on the detail, and getting the job done so that the number of people who are able to connect and who are able to get the service is steadily rising, a credible path forward so that by mid-2018 we will be at 75% of premises around the country able to connect to the network. This is the systematic, business-like, fact-based, rational approach of the Minister for Communications as he remains, and as the Prime Minister as he now is. He has delivered a remarkable turnaround on the chaotic incompetence that we inherited from Labor when it came to the NBN, and we will see the same approach across all of government as the Minister for Communications becomes the Prime Minister.
Order.